And in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs. You said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later. You've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. Have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people,
officers.
throw them in the jail, 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs, you said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later. You've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people,
officers.
throw them in the jail, 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job, deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration.
So they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As we've stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily detain and hand over to ICE. But there's no arresting going on. And you know this better than you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh, my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a catfight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
As I've said, we have plans for everything, Senator.
Okay.
What you just heard between Senator Elissa Slotkin and Secretary Pete Hegseth wasn't just another heated exchange on Capitol Hill. It was a clash over the soul of American democracy, the limits of executive power, and the sacred line separating civilian politics from the U.S. military. Slotkin's questions weren't about political theater. They were about one of the most fundamental principles in our republic. The military does not turn its power inward on its own citizens. From the very start, Slotkin framed the issue with precision. She reminded everyone that her core concern, voiced since Hegseth's confirmation hearing, was the risk of an administration using the military to suppress dissent, to intimidate protesters, or to erode the apolitical foundation that every democracy depends on. She recalled that former Defense Secretary Esper had been asked by President Trump to deploy active-duty troops against unarmed protesters and even to shoot them in the legs. Esper refused. That refusal was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of patriotism, a defense of constitutional order. Slotkin's warning was simple but powerful. If you love your country, you should want an apolitical military. In that one line, she drew a straight line from the founders' fears of standing armies to today's anxieties about authoritarian drift. A democracy cannot survive if the people begin to fear their own soldiers. Then came the central question, clear, direct, and deeply serious. Have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles? She wasn't asking about violent rioters. She wasn't excusing criminal acts. She was asking about citizens, protesters, exercising their constitutional right to assemble, speak, and petition their government. The response from Secretary Hegseth was evasive, defensive, and revealing. He tried to deflect by talking about violent agitators, shifting attention to people throwing concrete. But Slotkin cut through that immediately, pointing out that this wasn't about isolated violence. It was about orders, authority, and precedent. Her persistence mattered, because if the U.S. military, not law enforcement, but uniformed soldiers, is granted the authority to arrest, detain, or use force on American citizens, even temporarily, that's a direct challenge to the Posse Comitatus Act, the 19th century law designed precisely to prevent the military from being used as a domestic police force. Slotkin was defending that firewall, the boundary that keeps democracy from sliding into militarized authoritarianism. And when she asked, "Have you given the order for lethal force against protesters?" the room changed. Her voice carried the frustration of someone who has seen firsthand how blurred lines between military and political authority can destabilize nations. Remember, Slotkin is a former CIA analyst and Pentagon official who served in conflict zones. She knows what it looks like when governments turn their militaries inward. That's why her plea, "Please tell me the answer is no," wasn't rhetorical. It was deeply human. It was the voice of someone who's seen how democracies fall apart when leaders stop respecting limits. Hegseth's response, dismissive, sarcastic, even invoking the Bible in defense of his position, was a telling moment. When public officials treat constitutional questions like inconveniences, they reveal a dangerous arrogance. Slotkin wasn't reading from a script or engaging in partisan attack. She was trying to pull the conversation back to first principles: civilian control, rule of law, and human rights. When she brought up Iran and asked about day-after planning, she was returning to another vital lesson. Wars are easy to start, but the aftermath is where democracies fail if they lack strategy and foresight. That question, too, wasn't random. It linked to the broader theme of responsibility, the responsibility of leaders to think before acting, to plan before deploying force, and to uphold democratic accountability. The entire exchange revealed two visions of power. One sees power as something constrained by law, ethics, and civic duty, Slotkin's vision. The other sees power as something to be used at will, justified after the fact, the posture that Hegseth embodied. That tension is as old as the Republic itself. Here's what viewers should take away. The U.S. military is the most powerful fighting force on Earth. But what makes it great isn't just its strength, it's its restraint. The strength of American democracy lies in the idea that even the commander-in-chief cannot use soldiers against citizens for political gain. Once that line is crossed, it's nearly impossible to redraw.